In one of the last videos I showed you how to use the Barry Harris 6th diminished scale over a static chord and over the 2-5-1. And I also showed you how to modernize this sound. Now in this part 2 of this diptych, I'll show you the theory behind it all. Now, theory isn't music, and learning theory doesn't make you a musician. It can only help you to make music by understanding how music works. That 6th diminished theory is such a thing that lets you understand how music works, and it can be a true eye-opener. Now, Harris turned his 6th diminished theory into music, and the other way around. And in this lesson I'm going to tell you all about it in a theoretical concept, so that you know. Now, Barry Harris said that the chromatic scale is the mother of all, the all-knowing God, the universe of music. First, I thought he was talking about my wife because she knows everything too. But no. None of that nonsense. He was talking about the 12-note chromatic scale containing all the notes in one octave. From this universe, the chromatic scale, 2 whole tone scales descend. The C whole tone scale and the D flat whole tone scale. Now both contain half of the DNA of that universe, of that 12-tone scale. And both are symmetrical scales with only whole tone intervals. And this means that every note can be a starting point and will end up with exactly the same scale structure. That's also the reason why there are only 2 variations. Now, from those 2 whole tone scales, we'll see the birth of 3 diminished chords that each share half of the DNA from one of the 2 whole tone scales. C diminished 7, D flat diminished 7 and D diminished 7. And these chords are again symmetrical chords that are built from only minor third intervals. Every note in the diminished 7 chord can be the root, so every inversion is in fact the same chord. More than these 3 diminished chords do not exist in music, because all other diminished chords are inversions of one of these 3. So these chords and scales are one big family as Barry Harris describes. How well they go together in a harmonic framework we will see later on. So now we have established the relation between the notes of the 12-tone scale, and we're going to meet the families. La famiglia, il cosa nostra. One day! If you have studied extended chords, then maybe you know that a diminished 7 chord is the upper structure of a dominant 7 flat 9 chord. C diminished 7, for instance, is the upper structure of the A flat dominant 7 flat 9 chord, as you can see in this figure. The chords are almost the same. Now, to make it a little bit more clear, we can see the B double flat as the note A. And if we lower that note A with a half step, it becomes the note A flat, which is the root of the A flat dominant 7 chord. In other words, if we lower the minor 7 B double flat of the C diminished 7 chord to A flat, then we get an A flat dominant 7 chord. Now, because the diminished chord is a symmetrical chord, built from only minor third intervals, we can lower any note in this chord and get the same result, namely a dominant 7 chord. So lower the C to B and we'll get a B dominant 7 chord. And lower the E flat to D, we'll get a D dominant 7 chord. And lower the G flat to the note F, we'll get an F dominant 7 chord. And lower the A to the note A flat and we'll get an A flat dominant 7 chord. And by this, the 4 dominant chords are related to each other and to the C diminished chord and a little bit to the D diminished chord. They are brothers and sisters. They are the family of dominants. Now we'll see that there is also a group of 6th chords that is related to the same C diminished 7 ancestor. Now when we raise the diminished 5th G flat to the perfect 5th G in the diminished 7 chord, we will get a C minor 6 chord that is built from a root C, a minor 3rd E flat, a perfect 5th G and a major 6th A. We can do this for all inversions of this C diminished 7 chord. In other words, we can raise each of the notes of a C diminished 7 chord to generate a minor 6 chord. Raising the C to the note D flat results in a G flat minor 6 chord. Raising the E flat to the E results in an A minor 6 chord. Raising the G flat to the note G results in a C minor 6 chord. And raising the note A to the note B flat results in an E flat minor 6 chord. So these 4 minor 6 chords are brothers and sisters, and together they are nephews and nieces of the family of dominants. Now they are all offspring of the C diminished 7 chord. The dominant 7 chords are also related to the D diminished 7 chord, and that is because the lowered notes in the C diminished 7 chord that resulted in dominant 7 chords are part of the D diminished 7 chord. And the minor 6 chords are also related to the D flat diminished 7 chord. And that's because the raised notes in the C diminished 7 chord that resulted in minor 6 chords are part of the D flat diminished 7 chord. Now if we raise the diminished 5th and the minor 3rd in a C diminished 7 chord, we'll get a C major 6 chord that is built from the notes C, E, G and A. So now we are raising 2 consecutive notes. Now this chord shares 2 notes with the C diminished 7 chord and 2 notes with the D flat diminished 7 chord. Now we got 4 pairs of consecutive notes in a diminished 7 chord that we can raise with a half step. Each time we'll create another major 6 chord. Raising the C and E flat to C sharp and E results in an A major 6 chord built from the notes A, C sharp, E and F sharp. And raising the E flat and G flat to E and G results in a C major 6 chord built from the notes C, E, G and the 6th A. Raising the G flat and the B double flat to G and B flat results in an E flat major 6 chord built from the notes E flat, G, B flat and C. And finally, raising the notes B double flat and C to the B flat and D flat results in a G flat major 6 chord built from the notes G flat, B flat, D flat and E flat. So here's an overview of what happens when we raise 2 consecutive notes in the C diminished 7th chord. The raised notes are always the 3rd and the 5th in the major 6 chord. And now it gets interesting, because we can also lower the same 2 notes, the same 2 consecutive notes, that result in another set of 4 major 6 chords. So lowering the C and E flat to B and D results in a D major 6 chord with the notes D, F sharp, A and B. And lowering the E flat and the G flat to D and F results in an F major 6 chord with the notes F, A, C and G. And lowering the G flat and the B double flat to F and A flat results in an A flat major 6 chord with the notes A flat, C, E flat and F. And finally, lowering the B double flat and C to C sharp and B results in a B major 6 chord with the notes B, D sharp, F sharp and G sharp. Now these major 6 chords contain 2 notes of the C diminished chord and 2 notes of the D diminished chord. So all of these 8 major 6 chords are brothers and sisters and are related to the C diminished 7 chord. Now last, there's another branch in this big family, and those are the 4 dominant 7 flat 5 chords. Now these chords are the result of raising or lowering 2 non-consecutive notes of the diminished chord. To explain, if we raise the root C to D flat and the 5th G flat to G, then we'll get an E flat dominant 7 flat 5 chord built from the notes E flat, G, B double flat and D flat. If we raise the 3rd E flat and the 7th B double flat to E and B flat, then the C diminished 7 chord becomes a C dominant 7 flat 5 chord that is built from the root C, the 3rd E, the diminished 5th G flat and the minor 7 B flat. On the other hand, when we lower 2 non-consecutive notes, we obviously get another set of 4 dominant 7 flat 5 chords. So in the C diminished 7 chord, lowering the root C and 5th G flat to B and F, we'll get a B dominant 7 flat 5 chord built from the root B, 3rd D sharp, diminished 5th F and the minor 7th A. Now lowering the other 2 non-consecutive notes E flat and B double flat to D and A flat, we'll get a D dominant 7 flat 5 chord built from the root D, the 3rd F sharp, the diminished 5th A flat and the minor 7th C. So here you see an overview of the 4 dominant 7 flat 5 chords that are generated by either raising or lowering 2 non-consecutive notes. And notice that the second inversion of those chords is yet a new dominant 7 flat 5 chord. So there are 8 dominant 7 flat 5 chords that descend from the C diminished 7 chord. Now it should be clear that all the chords that we have seen in this lesson are one big family with the same C diminished 7 chord as their ancestor. And they all share the same DNA and therefore are connected. Now, and this is the core and essence of the 6th diminished theory. All these chords can be combined by using the diminished ancestor chord to connect them. So here you see the family tree. The oldest ancestor is the chromatic scale, and that one produces 2 whole tone scales. And the 2 whole tone scales produce 3 diminished 7 chords. Now on the left side we see descendants from the C diminished 7 and D flat diminished 7 chord. And on the right side we see descendants from the C diminished 7 and D diminished 7 chord. The offspring of those diminished chords we see in the branches of the tree. Now one branch has minor 6 chords, 4 of them. And one branch has 4 dominant 7th chords. And we see 2 branches of major 6 chords, 8 in total. And we see 2 branches of dominant 7 flat 5 chords, also 8 in total. So we have 24 chords that descend from the C diminished 7 chord. And they are all connected in this 6th diminished theory concept. So the MySQL query for this would look like this. There. So now we're going to make the jump to the 6th diminished scales. If we look at the C major 6 chord, C, E, G and A, we'll see that 2 notes of this chord are from the C diminished 7 chord and 2 notes come from the D flat diminished 7 chord. Now that is because we raised 2 notes in the C diminished 7 chord, the E flat and the G flat, to E and G. But looking at the initial branching of the diminished 7 chords from the chromatic scale, we'll see that there were 3 diminished descendants. C diminished 7, D flat diminished 7 and D diminished 7. Now in the C major 6 chord we'll miss the connection to that 3rd diminished chord, namely the D diminished 7 chord, D, F, A flat and C flat. So we'll add that diminished 7 chord to the C major 6 chord to link all 3 diminished chords, resulting in 8 notes that now create a so-called C major 6 diminished scale. C, G, E, F, G, A flat, A and B. If we harmonize this scale, we get an alternating between the major 6th and the diminished 7 chord that form a harmonic framework that can be used over a single chord or as a substitution. How this works you can learn in part 1, so watch that video to take it all on the road. The sound of this harmonized scale is very profound. So now it's clear that the diminished 6th scale is a product of 3 diminished 7 chords that descend from 2 whole tone scales that in their turn descend from the chromatic 12-tone scale. The C minor 6 chord, with the notes C, E flat, G and A, has 3 notes from the C diminished 7 chord and 1 note from the D flat diminished 7 chord, namely the note G. We'll add the missing diminished chord, the D diminished 7, D, F, A flat and C flat, to the C minor 6 chord, and this results in an 8-note scale that forms the C minor 6 diminished scale. C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, A and B. The harmonized scale in which the C minor 6 chord alters with the D diminished 7 chord would sound like this. A C dominant 7 chord contains 3 notes from the D flat diminished 7 chord, E, G and B flat, and obviously 1 note of the C diminished 7 chord. We're missing D diminished 7, D, F, A flat and C flat. Adding this chord to the C dominant 7 chord creates an 8-note C dominant 7th diminished scale that now has the DNA of all 3 diminished 7 chords and look like this. The harmonized C dominant 7 diminished scale alters between the C dominant 7 chord and the D diminished 7 chord. And then we have the C dominant 7 flat 5 chord that is also part of the family, as we have seen earlier. Now this chord contains 2 notes from the C diminished 7 chord, C and G flat, and 2 notes from the D flat diminished 7 chord, namely the notes E and B flat. So we should add the missing D diminished 7 with the notes D, F, A flat and C flat to the C dominant 7 flat 5 chord. And this results in a C dominant 7 flat 5 diminished scale. The harmonized scale will alter between the C dominant 7 flat 5 and the D diminished 7 chord. So what did Barry Harris want with this all? Well, I think he found a way to connect the whole collection of chords to one big family of chords that formed subsets in the form of this 6th diminished scale that he used as colors to paint over existing harmonic structures. And I showed you this in part 1 of this diptych about the 6th diminished theory. Now, I hope this inverted way of learning, practical in part 1 and theoretical in part 2, made you familiar with the Barry Harris diminished theory. So that rounds it up for today. If you have any questions, then don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below. Bye.